Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Last chapter, we introduced to quadratics and we looked at something called the factored form, but we never really explored where the factored form came from. We looked a little bit about how to turn factored form into standard form, but we didn't look at all as to how to turn standard form into factored form. And that is the goal of this chapter. Now, before we get too far into things, we're going to remind ourselves a little bit of a few previous skills. So for example, expand. Expand means multiply. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the first term and multiply it by everything inside the brackets. Now, you don't necessarily have to write out this step. Ugh. Sorry, I have a new stylus that I'm working with, and in some places it seems to help my handwriting, in other places it doesn't. And last chapter we looked at how to multiply binomials using FOIL. Okay, so hopefully we all remember that. Hopefully we're good with that, and away we go. Factoring is the opposite of expanding. So whereas factoring has brackets and the numbers are multiplied, expanding has no brackets, and all we're doing is we're adding and subtracting. Everything has been multiplied out. Now we're going to start with the simplest type of factoring today. The simplest type of factoring is common factoring. And what we do is we look for something called the greatest common factor. And this is the largest term that will multiply into all the other terms. So for example, the largest value that will multiply into 6x and 24 is 6. Largest for 10x squared and 15 is 5x. Oh, sorry. And the largest for 6x cubed, negative 12x squared, and 18x is 6x. Okay, now with the variables, it takes a little bit to get the hang of that one. And what you want is the variable with the smallest exponent. That will always be the greatest common multiple. So let's try a couple. Have a look at each of these and see if you can identify your GCF. And then factor it. Now, a couple of thoughts here. For part B, GCF could be positive or negative. You actually have a choice, but you usually want a positive x, or in this case, a positive x squared. So in order to make that happen, we got to factor out a negative number. Have a look at C. In this case, there is no common factor, nothing we can do about it, so we just leave it the way it is. Can't factor it. Now, what happens if you don't factor properly the first time? It's a big number, or you make a mistake, whatever. It's going to happen, I guarantee it. So here we're having a look. Hopefully you are correctly identifying that it's 25 is the largest factor, and you would factor out the 25 in the beginning. But let's say you don't. You're sleeping, it's 6 in the morning, you're not good at mental math, you just don't care, and you're only halfway paying attention, and hey, everything ends in a 5 or a 0. So you factor out that 5. It isn't wrong. It's just not fully factored. Hopefully, you notice that everything is a multiple of 5 again. So you can turn around and bring the missed factor to the front and multiply. It's a mistake that's going to happen. It might just be that you can't multiply by 37 or something like that. Depends on what the number is that you're looking at. So you end up doing it in steps. Sometimes breaking it down does make it easier. One bit of advice, no matter what you do, you should always be able to recreate the line that you made in the first place. So if we start with 10x minus 15, you should be able to recreate. So factor and then expand. And we get what we started with. Likewise over here, if we factor and then expand, we get what we started with. If you have time on a test or definitely an assignment, double check your work and make sure that you did it correctly. Now, this is a bit odd. If you have a look, the greatest common greatest common factor is y plus 1. And the reason why is it's multiplied into both terms. So when we factor it, we take out state our greatest common factor first, and then rewrite out everything else that's left. Notice that subtraction sign came along for the trip with the 7. So try the second one. This one's a little different than what we were doing before, although it does still follow the same principles, but it's probably going to mess with your head a little bit. However, it's going to become very important later on, so it's something you're going to want to get in the habit of doing, or at least get comfortable with. And that's it. I do want you to notice in the homework that the question 15 is not a mandatory question. Yes, I realize that you're at home and I'm not here to look over your shoulder, but even I'm saying it's a good question, but you don't have to do it. All right, guys, that's all for now, and we'll see you in a bit.